What I'm hoping to do today is to kind of give you almost a kitchen sink of ideas and give you the opportunity to take what works, make those modifications to things that maybe you can tailor to your own unique organization. And occasionally what I'll do is when I go over a particular concept and I have a few case studies that kind of line up really nicely in a particular idea. So oftentimes when we think about 3D printing and 3D printers, we're always worried about underutilization, that we're going to be a little unimaginative with them, that you might just have a 3D printer kind of picking up dust. And a lot of times I hear that concern, either imagined or real, that all we're going to end up doing is printing plastic trinkets. Real, I do think that it's a warning sign of an underutilized printer. So hopefully we can avoid doing that. Because, you know, at first it's almost like doing a magic trick. If all you're doing is printing plastic trinkets, it's kind of neat the first time you see it. But eventually it's like me pulling a coin from behind your ear. I do that the first time, you might be wowed. I do that every day. Not so exciting. So we're going to first, which is actually a dressed up way of saying printing trinkets. But when we print trinkets with a 3D printer, we want to do the right ones. Take advantage of all the things that a 3D printer can do. So for example, let's look at pop culture giveaways. You can really capitalize on the immediacy of 3D printing. It's kind of like how if you have a newsletter that's print newsletter, whereas you can advertise something immediately on Facebook or social media, 3D printing. These different pop culture, for example, Hodor, you have Left Shark. These things were kind of flashed in the pop culture phenomenon. People got excited about, and it's the kind of thing that you can, I'm sorry, hold on just a minute. There's a certain excitement around it, and by jumping into 3D printing, it allows you to really quickly capitalize on it, because oftentimes, by the time something is actually invented or made around it, manufactured, the excitement's already passed. Think fidget spinners, think, Pokemon Go, think of those odd pop culture events that happen. 3D printers also give you the option to create these customizable trophies. I think so many of us do things like reading clubs, video game tournaments. You can see there on the left. You have PlayStation trophies. You can either, create your own if you have a unique sort of, game or project or club. You can also obviously download a schematic and you can customize it. So you can put the winner's name. I think so many of us run things like Smash Brothers tournaments and the like. These are really simple, easy to do giveaways. And then, of course, there is a poop trophy, just because poop is always funny. So if somebody comes in second place, a schematic does exist for that. Name tags, plates, keychains. A lot of times these are very simple beginning projects to do, but they also allow you to, if you have like a teen advisory committee, or an anime club, you can actually make customized nameplates, name tags. Nice and easy way to make unique, customized, individualized items for existing library services. And I want to talk original giveaways, and we're going to do a case study here. This is William Floyd's birthday celebration. Now, William Floyd, he's locally famous in the area. Where I am, the Mastic Furniture Shirley Community Library, we have we're within the William Floyd School District. So William Floyd himself, you may know of him. Obviously, we're within New York. You go outside of New York, he's not terribly famous. Now, William Floyd is locally famous for being having signed the Declaration of Independence. Beyond that, he also never smiles in anything I've ever seen. So our school district tends to celebrate the William Floyd birthday for the last several years, and they partner with the library. They have the culinary students do a birthday cake, they do essay contests, that sort of thing. And the library actually hosts this birthday party for William Floyd. And last year they had asked us about doing some giveaways. And we're trying to think of what can we do. There's not a ton of William Floyd swag. But by a happy coincidence, we actually had a gentleman who dropped off, you can see there in figure a William Floyd bust he had made. And so we asked him if he was okay with us 3D scanning it and replicating it in miniature. And in fact, he said he was. So we take the William Floyd bust, we 3D scan it. You can see there on Exhibit B there. He's slowly being rendered in 3D, almost looks like a three-dimensional sonogram. We printed him out in full size there in figure C and D after he was cleaned up. So we did have a successful scan, and now we have this William Floyd STL file. That's the root file of the 3D print. And we thought, how do we make this into a giveaway? So the next thing we did was we miniaturized him and made sure that he could still hold up. And in fact, he did hold up even as a smaller print. So we took that file we had gotten from scanning him, and there in Exhibit B, you can see we dropped him into TinkerCAD, and nice and easy, just added a loop. And there in Figure C, we're able to print him out as a keychain. So all our attendees were able to get an original William Floyd keychain. And I think this is something that demonstrates the value of 3D printing. William Floyd swag just doesn't exist. We weren't going to be able to get a keychain easily. So while we printed out kind of a trinket, we manufactured something that didn't previously exist. And that's kind of the amazing ability of a 3D printer to deliver a manufacturing process, small scale, and create something that doesn't currently exist. And that's something I think you look at and you can apply. Everybody has their own local heroes, landmarks. Everybody's library is unique. And to be able to make a small scale manufacturing line, and we did roughly 150, which is about as high as I'd go with a small scale manufacturing line. Beyond that, then you may want to bring in a professional. I want to talk a little bit about public 3D printing services. Simply put, this is making your printer available to the public, either moderated, where they submit a file and you then print it, where they have access directly to your 3D printer. Oftentimes, libraries have a 3D printer, make it available to the public, but it can be really a bit of a slog getting folks to initially take advantage of it. I think a lot of times they're not sure how to use it. And one of the successes we've had actually is first finding our audiences. Among them are hobbyists. So when you have a 3D printer and it's available for the public, hobbyists are a great group to target. We've had a lot of success with people that do model railroads and RC cars and actually do their own dollhouses and accessorize them. And the advantage of, and this particular print actually, this was done in 8 pieces. The only thing that wasn't 3D printed is the metal rail. The advantage of going and finding hobbyists, or hobbyists love to talk about their hobby. It's the thing they're passionate about. And once you locate your hobbyists and you get them excited and you show them the implications of 3D printing, they talk to these tight-knit communities that are maybe niche on their own, but you target enough, you very quickly find that your 3D printer is finding plenty of use. Occasionally, as a starting point, you can actually simply just print one of these models just to get that conversation going so folks see it and see the implications. Gaming miniatures. This is a huge audience now. I think so many of our libraries are looking into things like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder. It's really seen a resurgence, and libraries have recommitted themselves to these games. While it's largely done pen and paper, there's plenty of tabletop accessories, miniatures, and these are the things that are generally prohibitively expensive for libraries to do. And for, obviously people that do it within their own houses, miniatures are the expensive part of this. So to be able to do this at a low cost, either to augment an in-house program you're doing, or to demonstrate to the public the value of a 3D printer. If you print out a couple of Dungeons and Dragons miniatures, very quickly you'll find patrons coming out of the woodworks looking to do their own. either from an online repository such as Thingiverse or creating their own files. Replacement parts. So one of the great things that a 3D printer can do is print parts, particularly that are out of stock, don't exist anymore. Very common things that patrons will look for is like the washer wheel in their dishwasher. These things tend to break, but they're easy enough to replicate. You can find an existing file. You can actually 3D scan one of the working wheels that a patron still has, and then reprint one. Um, Anytime there's, I'm also talking washer screws. It's kind of like when you get a furniture and you're missing that one piece, and it's oddly specific. You have the ability to make these replacement parts on site. And I think that's one of the exciting things. That's one of the things they think is going to drive 3D printers into the average user's home, the ability to just render these parts. And it's a bonus for the manufacturer too, because a lot of times when that one missing piece, it's not a moneymaker for them. It's actually, it can lose the money when they have to send a part if it's under warranty. So it's far simpler to provide a 3D schematic. So programs and software. In any library doing 3D printing, TinkerCAD is largely going to be a foundation for you. TinkerCAD checks off so many boxes. Among these, it's free. That's always great. It's very flexible and very powerful. You can do very basic designs. You can do very advanced designs. Because it's browser-based, it really works well in a library environment. So if you're using multi-use computers, for example, that maybe have deep freeze or that wipe at the end of the night, and you don't have the ability to save, because this is all browser-based and cloud-saved, it kind of works around that. Also, because it is browser-based, you can do it on a Chromebook, which is a real money saver. Because you can get a Chromebook for around $200 versus five, six, seven, $800 and up for a laptop. Never mind a desktop computer. TinkerCAD does have a 13 and up requirement or parental permission. So if you're working with younger children, you're going to want to get that parental permission. The other neat thing is you can actually manage multiple jobs at the same time under one login. So if you have one single staff login and everybody's working on their project, you can almost use that as a classroom to manage all of those projects before printing. So I'm a big fan of TinkerCAD. I really think that it tends to be the foundational piece of software for a lot of libraries. Blokify. So Blokify, now we're looking at an actual iOS app. This is for the iPad. And the neat part about incorporating iPad apps into your 3D printing is it really broadens the age range you can work with. So I've used this particular software with children as young as kindergarten. It's very much the Minecraft of 3D printing. It's a block by block, drag and drop interface with terrain. So it's very good at building like castles and the like, but we've done plenty of projects where kids have just done very cubic types of designs. I've also used it with teenagers, and they do tend to like it. And with the older folks, they refer to it as cross stitch. So I guess if you're younger, you'll call it Minecraft. Otherwise, it may remind you of a cross stitch template. It's a very inexpensive app. I believe it's $3. And it also can model video game art very well, those kind of sprites like Super Mario. So a lot of times we'll print things out as inspiration that are video game inspired, Minecraft inspired, to get people excited about this piece of software. And the jobs are actually exported. So you can make your little job and then you can send it via email to print at a later date. Again, looking at how you can use a tablet to help 3D print, Cubify Draw. This is a very simple interface. You literally put your finger on the iPad and you sketch a two-dimensional image. It has to have two lines that meet, and then you can make that object filled in, or you can print it more as a cookie cutter. It takes all of a minute to render. You can also import an image and trace over an image as inspiration. And you can use any image that or any STL file that you design, and you can actually drop that into another piece of software like TinkerCAD and develop it further. This piece of software works really well with young children, but it also works well with adults. If you're doing a lecture style class where you want everybody to still walk away with an original design, with a single iPad or two, you can have a class very quickly of 10 or 15 people. Just make a 3D object to take away at a later date. So it's really a simple stripped down editor, but it really broadens the number of people you can bring into a 3D printing class, or at least have an experience. Collaborative projects, saying think game sets. Collaborative project is the kind of thing that everybody can be working on together at the same time, where everybody can work on a piece and bring it all back together. I use the game set one as an example. We've done things where we've all worked on we've made like a department challenge where teenagers, for example, can do a chess set. So everybody's working on their own individual pieces, their rooks, their pawns, their knights, their king, their queen, and it all gets put together, and that can exist within the department. And obviously, pieces do go missing, but the wonderful part about 3D printing is you have those files, and they're all available to print a replacement should something go missing. And that actually leads to a broader discussion about if you have a lot of us have board games within our library, and pieces do often go missing. And games like Ticket to Ride, there are replacement parts for that for Monopoly. So it kind of takes some of the hurt out of losing pieces. Again, you can 3D scan an original and replicate it, or you can just make a replacement that's kind of a proxy. So earlier we looked at 3D scanning William Floyd, and that was more of a traditional desktop-based 3D scanner. Happily, there's a lot of mobile 3D options that are kind of coming into play. In this particular one, this is called the Structure Sensor for iPad, and that is just a little attachment that piggybacks onto an iPad and turns it into a 3D scanner, and actually a pretty good one. And in this particular case, we're looking at a zombification program we had done. We had gotten the sensor for iPad, and what we did was we had some of our teams actually scan each other, and you can see that in Exhibit A. And once they scanned them, they began to print themselves out, which you can see in Exhibit B and C there. So they did a high quality render of themselves, and eventually they wanted to do neater things. So Exhibit D there, what you can see is we took one of our teen librarians, he was our guinea pig in this, and we ported in a scan of him into TinkerCAD and then zombified him, kind of messed him up a little bit, and later painted him. So you can see he's now zombified. And we do that program in the fall, and actually it's an interesting way for the teens to do a scan of themselves, and then, in a way, I wouldn't say personalized because nothing's more personal than a scan of themselves, but to augment it further with 3D design. Should also be on the lookout. Right now, you have this iPad scanner. In the past, there's been software that's piggybacked on an Android phone. Unfortunately, the one went defunct. My expectation is that as phones get a little bit stronger and more capable of doing augmented reality and virtual reality, we should see that type of thing come back. And that's a way to have an inexpensive scanner. When you're doing programs, remixing classes are neat ones. A remixing class essentially is you're taking pre-existing designs and then you're changing them. You're making them unique. You might be combining them. In this case, you see I took a triceratops and a fish and made tricerafish. I'm not terribly talented when it comes to 3D design. Folks can do a lot better than this. What you want to look for is Creative Commons licensing. So on a lot of things on Thingiverse, they're under Creative Commons license. So as long as you're not looking to make a profit, they have no problem with you taking a file, changing it, printing it out, provided you give credit. Um, And if you have, you know, a regular following in some of your 3D printing classes, they can actually remix each other's things too, and they get a lot of excitement out of that, taking a file from a friend and changing it. 3D printing art shows is something I highly recommend. So here at the community library, we have a teen 3D printing club, and they meet twice a month. Um, and it's been going on for some time. And what we do in the 3D printing club is, in part, it helps. I'm sorry, in the 3D printing art show, they work on their things all year round, and they kind of develop a virtual portfolio. And so what we began doing the first year was we had a standard art show, but we introduced 3D modeling for the first time. And we took several of their works, we blew them up, the schematics you can see behind a gentleman here. So that's a 3D schematic that's printed out on foam board. And then we also render several of their 3D prints fairly large. So they have basically almost like a gallery of their work. The advantage to doing that is if you have any 3D printing clubs that kind of meet on a regular basis, this gives them a way to kind of have a year-end send-off. It also gives you the opportunity to attract new people to your club. So everybody kind of sees everyone's work. Some folks graduate out, and you can bring in the next generation of 3D printers and students. And currently now we're looking at offering this rather than as an addition to an existing art show, as possibly as a standalone. So we all know 3D printing, even as costs drop on this, it's still an expense, and we're always looking to save money. So I'm going to go over a few ways that you can save money when engaging in 3D printing. Obviously, Lewis Oldfield here is on a fixed budget. So we're not on an apple juice budget, but we do like to save money. So one of the ways you can save money is by shopping around for filament. Um, Generally speaking, filament is your consumable. It's your recurring cost that you're using. And if we just, it's very easy to just stick to the filament that comes with your printer. Um, a lot of times it feels like the safe move, and in a way it is. It's the recommended filament for your printer. However, it's rarely a bargain. You can shop around for generic filament. Uh, what I do suggest is playing around a little bit. Don't go and buy 20 of the newest generic and hope it works. Is shop around a bit, find the one that works. And generally speaking, you may need to make a temperature adjustment because the melt temp might be slightly different on a different filament. But once you find one that you're happy with the cost and you're happy with the general performance, my recommendation is that you go and you stick to that particular filament from then on, unless you're no longer happy with the cost and performance. But experiment a little bit, find the one that works for you, and then stick to it. Alternative consumables. So the first consumable we looked at was just filament, but also a lot of 3D printers require painter's tape, for example. Um, and this is something where you can buy one already fitted to the bed, but it does tend to be more expensive. By simply using some scissors and cutting some existing bulk tape, it takes a little more work, but it can constitute a real cost saver long term. Likewise, there are advanced adhesives for some printers, but oftentimes you can replace that with something as simple as washable Elmer's glue. Miniature printers. So when you're looking to save money on a printer, obviously you can buy a budget model, but budget models rarely hold up well. They tend to be inexpensive and disposable long term. If you're looking to commit to a printer long term, but you don't want to spend a ton of money, you can look for a miniature version of a lot of standard printers, like the Ultimaker, like the Taz line of printers, and you'll sacrifice the build area. You'll be forced to make smaller prints, but the quality will hold up. So that is an example. If you don't want to sacrifice quality, but you still want to be able to save a bit of money on a printer, miniature printers may be something you want to look at. So take advantage of your educational or nonprofit status. There's a lot of free software out there. When you take advantage of a 501c3 or an educational status or nonprofit status. Autodesk in particular offers Fusion 360, Maya, and AutoCAD. They offer institutional licenses. You do have to get a little creative. A lot of times you'll go to these sites and it'll appear that libraries aren't explicitly listed, but generally my experience has been pretty good about if you put in that they do tend to honor it. And I believe Autodesk will give a license for 3 years at a time, and then you may need to re-up. Beyond that, a lot of times when you purchase a printer, make sure that there's, check to see if there's an educational gateway for them, because oftentimes, for example, MakerBot can come with things like lesson plans and certifications, discounts. So don't just go on Amazon and buy the one that looks cool. Go and check and see if, as an educational, uh, whether your educational status, nonprofit status, tax exempt status can get you a bit more. Being a good citizen of Earth. Um, 3D printers are, a powerful technology, and I think they do have the ability to be used for good and not evil. So, having said that, let's look at some of the things you can do to make the world a little better place when you're 3D printing. We've had great luck with teen volunteers. Um, your teens generally are looking for community service credit, and they actually can be very helpful if you're working with 3D, if you're doing like a 3D print club, you're working regularly with teens with 3D printing software. They tend to get very proficient with it, and you can use them to expand your reach with your 3D printing services. So, for example, when you start doing classes with younger children, it can require a little more handholding, and sometimes the staff isn't there for that. But to be able to have volunteers on hand, it can really help with crowd control, with assisting, um, and it can help you kind of expand the age range you're working with if you can't really do something that's too staff intensive. So I highly recommend using teen volunteers if you have an ongoing program where you feel like they're building up their proficiencies. Prosthetics. Um, I think by now it's pretty well documented that a 3D printer can very cost effectively render a functional prosthetic. Um, at this point, you can, for $40 in materials, make a $12,000 prosthetic. I'm going to look very quickly at the Prosthetic Hand Challenge. This was an event we held at the community library last summer. In this particular event, we worked with two organizations. We worked with Enable. They are also enabling-the-future.org, and they provide open source 3D schematics for different prosthetics. They also help facilitate folks who need a prosthetic to locate somebody that either has a printer or is participating in the program. The other organization we worked with was the Hand Challenge. It's the Prosthetic Kids Hand Challenge. And what they do is they actually will take 3D printed hands and you can send them to them. I believe they're based in South Carolina. And then they will source them throughout the world to people in need. So you don't, in the case of Enable, generally they try to find somebody that needs a hand and matches them with a donor. With the Hand Challenge, what they'll actually do is take hands and they'll be the ones to source them. So what we did was we assembled 15 kits. So we printed, there you can see, this kind of shows you just how much of this is 3D printed. So approximately 90% of these are printed from a file. And then there's some tensioner pins and some screws, and you can see some finger grips. And there's a Velcro pad. And those are all sold in a kit from 3duniverse.org. So we assembled approximately 15 kits. So we already did all the printing during slack time on the printer. So we printed all the pieces that we needed, which you can actually see there in Figure C. You'll see written instructions. You'll see the tools that we used. Those are super glue, some screwdrivers, some tweezers, and needle nose pliers. In Figure A, you can see we used a YouTube tutorial in addition to the written instructions. And we also employed an augmented reality app that worked on Android phones. And here you see in this particular program, we opened it to anyone 13 and up. Anyone under that needed parental supervision. And we got a very diverse crowd of people. We ended up having 50 people show up for 2 weeks in a row to assemble these prosthetic hands. Um, Everyone from families, and a fair number of families, to we had some retired engineers, to we even had, I suspect, a biker gang that decided they were really into 3D printing and putting together hands. Uh, so it was a very interesting group. And more surprising, this was done over 2 weeks, and nearly everybody came back for both weeks. At the end of it, we were able to assemble 15 hands. This is like almost finished state. Some of these needed a tune-up before they were ultimately sent on. We did a little bit of quality control. And I think this particular program shows you, first of all, the good you can do with a 3D printer, but it also demonstrates a 21st century manufacturing process. I mean, this is like a very practical use of an emerging technology. So we had a lot of fun with this. We're not sure if we're going to do it at this scale again. We were looking at one of our sister libraries, the Half Hollow Hills Library. Also makes kits for the hands, and then they offer people the opportunity to either take them home or assemble them at the library on their own time for community service credit, which I think is also a very nice model. Continuing with being a good citizen of the world, you have eco-friendly filaments. So when you're using a standard FDM printer, that's the one we're most familiar with, that kind of feeds the filament in and prints it, melts it and prints it. You have ABS and PLA. And now standard ABS filament can actually take thousands of years to biodegrade. PLA is a cornstarch one. And believe it or not, it can be composted. It can't be composted in your backyard. It really requires very specific conditions. But under the right conditions at a composting facility, PLA is theoretically compostable. There are also companies now that make ABS filament that is biodegradable. Um, there's Enviro is one company, um, or one brand, I should say, that does two things. They do one which is a ABS that is biodegradable. They also do, if you notice, your filament generally sits in a plastic holder. That can be done in cardboard. So now there's some companies that are even doing that in cardboard, which just takes away some of the, just makes it a little more eco-friendly. And there are some companies that will do even tree planting as an offset. So those are things to look at. What you don't want to do is fill up a junkyard for 100,000 years. So if there's ways around that, it's something you may want to investigate. So earlier we looked at prosthetics for children. There's also animal prosthetics. And this is a great way, again, with that community service in mind, is to partner with local animal shelters, offer community service credit. On the left there, you can see a prosthetic foot for a duck. And on the right there, that's an actual model called the Figo, kind of like Fido. That again, you can print out the majority of it, and then with a couple of simple screws and sockets and some Velcro, you can really put that together. And at a lot of these animal shelters too, sadly, one of the more common things they do see is amputations because animals can get hit by cars. Um, so that is something you may want to look at. It's a great way to again have a practical manufacturing, a 21st century manufacturing process, and show a lot of the good it can do. I'm going to go through some tips and tricks. Um, Policy is important. If you're going to have a 3D printer, you are going to need to have some policy built around it to make sure that you're doing an even-handed and consistent service for your public. This statement is from the American Library Association's Office of Information Technology policy. While there is no way of predicting the magnitude of the intellectual property and/or product liability disputes over 3D printed items that will occur in the future, this uncertainty should not deter us from continuing to use 3D printers in innovative and exciting ways. I think we tend to get scared when there's a new technology about the legal implications, and I don't want anybody to, get kind of willy-nilly with policy. Policy is important. Um, Copyright is important. But I think also we know that there are things that go on, like we all lend CDs, where CDs get checked out and they get returned to us 24 hours later. It's not that people hate music. I think a lot of folks are burning CDs. That doesn't stop us from burning or from lending CDs. So what you do want to look at when you're constructing policy is just you want to give, you obviously want to cover copyright. You want to clearly enunciate respect for copyright, privacy. So occasionally you'll have people that are looking to go and prototype at your library. And should they have an expectation of privacy? If you have the next great invention, you may be concerned that somebody's going to steal that idea. So you may want to give considerations to privacy. How much privacy can you afford a patron? Acceptable use. You want to outline things like common things like, you can't print weapons is a fairly common one, aside from honoring copyright. So you do want to outline your acceptable use. You want to come up with some cost in all likelihood. I don't think everybody's going to be printing for free. At the community library, we do have free prints within the context of a program, but then usually there's two ways to look at charging. You can do an offset based on the weight of an object, how much filament it's using, or you can base your cost on the amount of time that the printer is in use. Really not looking to make money, but you are looking to encourage responsible use of your printer. And then I have the because I said so clause. Not that that's how you'd phrase it, but you do generally want some sort of catch-all that's going to be, you don't want to end up in a philosophical debate with the patron over what constitutes a weapon. So you do want a kind of catch-all that you can still refuse um, for any reason. That can help preempt a lot of arguments. So repurposing misprints. Um, while 3D printing is a precision technology, you will find things that don't print well, that have errors, that you have to cancel out prints. It's not an uncommon occurrence. And sometimes human error is involved. So for the longest time, we just took those misprints and we threw them out. But over time, we thought of almost setting up, it almost looks like a swear jar. We took a large pretzel container and we started taking those misprints and dropping them in there. Because we found that when our printer was out on the floor, patrons wanted even the misprints. They were just fascinated by it. It's also an opportunity to demonstrate different concepts of 3D design. For example, that gray cylindrical print, where that canceled out, that's still able to give a great example of infill percentage of how hollow or thick an object is. They can also be used in maker crafts. People get very creative about how they can use them. And also, when you're printing an object and the print fails later on in the print, that initial footprint of the object, that can be a pretty effective stencil. So if you get creative, I always say don't throw it out unless you have to. Folks find tons of uses for these things. So managing sounds and smells. Um, Sometimes a printer will get very noisy. One of the things you want to do is make sure you're engaging in regular maintenance. If you're not using grease at the right intervals on your printer, You can have metal on metal contact, which obviously will not sound great. It's been my experience that PLA filament is less aromatic than ABS, so that might be a consideration you have. But also with a 3D printer, if you keep it covered, that can help cut down on a lot of smell. So whether the printer itself is enclosed or you build an enclosure to keep it in, something as simple as acrylic, that can really keep smells down. Although it can alter the temperature, so it's something you want to keep an eye on. It can trap in heat. Whenever possible, you want your 3D printer in a ventilated space. Okay, you don't want to lock two people in a broom closet and have the thing running continuously. There have been studies that show that it's essentially the same amount of emissions as a gas range stove. So that's not terribly concerning, but it's still a new technology, and you don't want to be a guinea pig in this. So as much as possible, if you have ventilation, great. But otherwise, don't keep it in a small enclosed area with people. Sound effects settings. Some printers are very loud, but it's by design. They make lots of beeps and bloops. You should check your settings and see if that's the case. I know MakerBot is a fan of doing sound effects on their printers. So a lot of times those are settings you can change. And finally, creating a barrier. What I mean by that is most of the noise generated by your printer is it rocking back and forth and making contact with a surface. So simply by placing almost like a memory foam down on the base, that can really cut down on noise. So I highly recommend you record and stream your 3D printing. That could be as simple as a Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Time-lapse videos are excellent, okay, especially if you're impatient like me. Time-lapse videos are very easy to do with an iPad, and everybody kind of, when the job starts, wants to see how it finishes. These are great, great, great content for social media, for your social media presence, for Facebook, for Instagram. Um, it can draw attention to your printer. It's an opportunity to have a broader conversation about the programs and services you offer. And some printers, in fact, have a built-in camera, which is something you could maybe take advantage of directly rather than using another recording device. So the most common question I always get asked about 3D printers is which one should I buy? And it's not the easiest question to answer because everyone's experience may vary. I've had printers that have been great. I've had printers that have been terrible. But based on the hours I've used them, I'm still within the margin of error. One of the ones I suggest is going to 3D Hubs that does an annual 3D printer guide. Um, 3D Hubs is essentially like the Rotten Tomatoes of 3D printing. And by that, I mean they're a review aggregator. So they take hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours on printers and come up with aggregate scores based on multiple reviews. So it's a much broader base of knowledge. They also divide up their printers into different categories like workhorse, prosumer, and budget. So you can first start with thinking about, do I want something that just works? Do I want something that's fancy? Do I want something that I can put a lot of hours on? Am I looking to save money? So really, my suggestion when you're looking is first think about how you intend to use your printer, and then go to a review aggregator like 3D Hubs, rather than hit up an individual whose experience may be great, but it might not be. Like, you can have a terrible 3D printer, you're just a lucky individual and it's always worked for you. Or you might be an unlucky person who has a great printer, but you've just had bad experience. But without the broad base of knowledge that one of these aggregators has, you're kind of taking a shot in the dark. Online learning software. So a lot of times we kind of outrun where our expertise is. So, you know, many of us at the community library are comfortable with 3D design, but we're not engineers by any stretch. And some of the software is out of our reach, out of our understanding. If you subscribe to online learning services like lynda.com, they do have extensive offerings and learning opportunities. There's also more informal learning that can be done on YouTube. TinkerCAD, Autodesk both maintain YouTube channels that offer really nice classes. So that it can either be a way of empowering your patrons to learn without you, or to extend your reach if there's an offering that's simply not within your comfort zone. 3D printing display, I think, is essential. You're not going to get your 3D printer used if it's hiding somewhere. We are big fans of putting our 3D printer out on the floor whenever possible. We've put it on a mobile station. And we've also used it as a learning opportunity. So we have displays that show the infill percentage, that show the difference between rafts and no rafts, supports and no supports, kind of demonstrate some of the things that can be done with a 3D printer. Obviously, we have all our flyers for our programs on 3D printing that are built around it. And we also have a general guide that explains the technology. So as much as possible, we want a staff member out there with it, but we can't do that at all hours. So we make it as much a learning opportunity just as a standalone display as we can. And it really helps drive use of the 3D printer and attendance in our programs. And finally, I always suggest that folks build a library of your designs. It's an opportunity on a platform like Thingiverse, where you can collect, you can upload your own models, you can collect others within a collection. It's a real opportunity to do some community building. Occasionally we showcase works from other people, from our patrons, so you can empower them to have their own Thingiverse page and collect some of their stuff within a library branded one, where they can upload directly to the library branded one. It's just a way of kind of making a neat, almost like a library of things. It's kind of a catalog of all these models that have been built inside the library with library assistance. Just a nice way to kind of tie it all together. Think of it as a community art gallery in many ways. Okay, there's my shameless plug. If you're interested in ebooks, how to or digital collections generally, and you just want to have some resources on staff training and how to build programs around it, it's a pretty good book, my mom says. And finally, here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out. I hope the audio wasn't too bad on my end. I do apologize. On Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, and my website there, thedigitallibrarian.com, I do discuss some of these topics long form, like how to start a 3D printing club or how to do that hand challenge. So if you're looking for a deeper dive into those topics too, that's not a bad choice. Kelsey, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. Again, I'll just echo Nick. Thank you everybody for being so patient with the audio. It's very appreciated. And now we'll get into some questions. Nick, does your 3D printer offer printing in 2 colors?
So we have 3 3D printers now. One is a dual extruder, so we can print in 2 colors. And those colors don't blend. It's more like if you were making a zebra, it can do black and white. It's not going to make gray. So yeah, that's basically, and then we have 2 other ones that do single color.
Great.
And you can always paint too.
Oh, perfect. And what 3D scanner did you use for Floyd's bust?
That one was, I'd have to look it up. If you give me an email address, I'd be happy to share that. In the past, we had used a MakerBot one, but truth be told, I haven't had good experience with that one. The model of the other one, I can't recall. And then the mobile one was the sensor scanner.
Okay. And then for the replacement parts, what % fill would you recommend? This person says they typically use 20% fill.
It really depends on what you're looking to do with it. I mean, 15-20% fill is standard when we're doing a print. Basically, think about how much weight is going to go on the thing. You know, so when we're looking at like one of those washer wheels for the dishwasher, I would go much higher just because you don't want it to snap. So think about the purpose. If it's going to be like a mounting bracket, go thick.
Perfect. And we'll give it a couple more minutes if anybody has some last minute questions they want to chime in with. And Nick, if you have anything else you want to add before we wrap it up, that's totally fine too. But if we don't...
Okay. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Like I said, if folks are looking for a bit of a deeper dive into some of those case studies, those are on the website. Um, but yeah, beyond that, I just want to thank you, Kelsey, for helping, especially when the audio went a little awry.
Totally fine. It happens to the best of us. So with that, we'll let everybody go for the afternoon. Thank you again to Nick and all of you for joining us this afternoon. This webinar was recorded, so it will be archived on the NYLA website. And everybody have a great afternoon. Thanks.